Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I would like to speak about an idea that with each unhidden self, there comes a hidden world. That the sense of ourself and the sense of the world are not that far separate, that it is in one moment of manifest observable intelligence where the world is perceived simultaneously alongside the self. I consider that in some sense there is the same codependency we find between an object and a subject. For example, you look at anything I'm looking at a cup in front of me. This cup has an objective existence, but it also has a subjective existence. And when I look at the object, the subject pops up instantly. It's as if there. It's as if that object has become contained as that sort of subject. The name cup, for example, the term cup. So this to the objective realm of this object, there is a corresponding subjective realm. Now I want you to think that with the sense of the self, or what the self is in some sense the idea in which the object orbits around. The subjective existence, the subjective value of the phenomena is more real than the objective value. When we wonder about who we are, we don't think of ourselves as just, neurology. We don't just think of ourselves as just particles in space. There's an intelligence factor, and that intelligence factor is the subjectification of the human moment. If we say an object and a subject in their validity require to be simultaneous, that means an object with a subject has no soul. A subject with an object has no world. The relationship of self, of self with world, of world with self, of world with world. I consider death to be a moment where it's actually the experience of the world with the world. You know, between the transition of attention from one's conscious position. It is true that either the subject can change or the object can change. The object will change. Based on the objective realm, we are in some sense bound to a temporary existence. We can't do much about it, at least with the current technologies we have. I mean, it's not the Elysium movie yet in our current culture and civilization. So we do not have technologies that keep the person immortal. So what does that mean? That means because the objectivity will at some point end, it means the significance of the subjectivity to the objective being may seem hollow. That means your objective self loses everything, but your subjective self, in some sense, I have this. This is, you can say, a hypothesis that the subjective self carries on because it is not conditionally dependent. Certain things. Think of it this way: a person's behavior can be ascribed to their environment. We can think that the environment is causing the person to be a certain way, or we can feel that the person's inner environment is causing them to be a certain way in the environment, or a mix of both. I'll give you an example of this. For example, the concept of mysticism, of enlightenment, all these discussions on a liberated state of being, of freeing one's mind. Well, how can I tell you? It's like enlightenment is finding a subjective truth to the objectivity, and that subjective truth tends to be the opposite of the ideas accepted as reality. You know what that means is there is a huge chance and potential that when the conscious being goes to explore the unconscious, when it enters the new planes of the unconscious, it will actually try to interpret them per the past. So this is really kind of like this thing they would say where it's only the Diamond Sutra made it very clear. It's like he moves in the grassland without moving a single grass, you know. He crosses the lake without making a single ripple. It's a sense of entrance without identification, right? And usually all children in the world, they enter with a sort of absent identification. Their identities are not solidified yet. I can say the child's mind, I mean, let's say it like this: consciousness is like gas, the gas state, and the mind of the child is liquid, you know. And then eventually it solidifies into an individual conscious being. So in the process of solidifying into the individual conscious being, it's kind of as if the world is given chaos because the ultimate order is given first. There's a moment where I thought about Greek mythology and its suggestion that the whole cosmos began from chaos. And when I looked at scientific thought, it's pretty much the same. The nothingness that the nothing that scientists feel something came from is not just pure nothing. It is like a chaos, a pool of energy without a certain manifest order. So you see, it's as if like when we can't really see as far in the past, we have to work with probabilities and potentials. It's the same with the future. This is why the present moment is what the person really has. If I ask you right now, imagine like 10 years from now, or imagine 10 years before now. You know, those will be moments where your mind could fathom, but whatever it conceives, it is not local. It is non-local. I consider subjective realms to be non-local. They have nothing to do with the location. You can access a thought anywhere. What does that mean? That means it's as if like the body is in its own world, the objective self is in an objective world, but it seems like the subjective self is also in a subjective world. You know, so it's kind of like we're an object that realized it's an object, and by realizing it's an object became a subject to itself. And now history and language and civilization has evolved to a point where the creature is wondering, what am I beyond the words that define me? What am I beyond the programs that I can identify and recognize? Sometimes you can say a person doesn't even know themselves. You know, there's so many people in this world using a bridge the wrong way only because they do not have the patience to see who they become. Life takes you on so many turns. I am telling you, well, there were many moments in my life where I felt the whole thing was an inefficient system. And there were moments where I felt it was the ultimate success, only to be schooled by the cosmos on existential change. The thing is that we have to become conscious enough to adopt collective responsibility. This is really the pattern we see. When you go look at all the great leaders of man, when you go look at history, why are those names there in history? Because those human beings saw a world that they got involved with. You know, they got involved in. They did not just identify with cherry-picked content of the moment. They identified with the whole living system as if they're a part of it. And there's a difference in behavior and even in your karmic output. You see, we see over time, based on carbon pressure on carbon particles, we see diamonds develop. And so when we see diamonds develop over a long duration, it seems like the cosmic landscape crystallizes itself. So it's as if we look at ourselves and we're like, somehow we're way more advanced than our ancestors. Do you know why is it that it's like civilization is not going the opposite way? There are certain mathematical theories. I remember reading this book, I believe it was called Fractal Time, where there was a suggestion that mathematically the cosmos may reach a certain point where all of it suddenly starts reversing, rewinding, like a film. As if like this film goes, and suddenly it goes the opposite way. It reverse engineers, as if like a turtle constantly taking its head in and out of its shell, in and out of its subjective realms. When human psychology is pushed to the brink, when too much chaos is confronted than one can handle, anytime somebody picks up a weight that is beyond their strength, eventually their individual consciousness will rely on a collective system. If the collective system is not present, imagine you're alone and you're in a chaotic situation. You see, you may be physically alone, yes, but your mind has access to the world in some sense. So what I mean by that is that sometimes you handle chaos with order, and if the order doesn't work, you put a greater mirror than the chaos of the chaos, and you put a mirror of chaos in front of the chaos, and the chaos scares itself into order. You see, a lot of forces in this reality are not, a lot of things on this planet are not moving consciously. You know, we human beings, language is such a special thing. I think we don't understand the significance of language in our lives. You know, because language is like that wolf, excuse me, but like that wolf pissing the line borders of its territory in the mountains. You know, it's as if the language we have used is the stable reality we're choosing to have the meaning of our lives revolve around. It's so fascinating. I thought to myself, okay, I've always kind of in my conscious waking state, I've been an objective being. I mean, I'm not talking about dream states, because the life of our dreams is ones where it's actually the mind creating a body. It's not your body. So you can say in a dream state, you are a creature of subjectivity, but in the conscious waking state, you're a creature of both of them. You know? Language is our container of the cosmic landscape, our more crystallized container of the cosmic landscape. And so what it means is that any animal, imagine I write science fiction often, and in a chapter of my science fiction novel, I've created, the novel's called The Messenger of Giants, and there's a, what do you call it? The United Nations in the year, many years in the future, it's a way in the future story. The United Nations has developed a galactic sector, you know, and it has various different sectors, and animals are kind of connected to advanced technology to be able to have the capacity of human consciousness. And it's this situation I've created in the science fiction novel where a cow where this cow with connected like robotic technology has gone on the UN stage to give a speech, and the cow is saying about all the years that human beings ate cow meat, you know, and that they need to get, in some sense, paid for it, you see. And it was one of those things that I realized we are always blind to what we do not choose. I find this to be a reality. That what is in our choice is simultaneously in our attention. What is not in our attention is not in our choice. That means if there's a button to something and you have no clue where this button is, it's like, how are you going to press it? Do you know? It seldom is this said, but rationality needs irrationality to process. So the main point of this episode, guys, is really, oh my god, I think I didn't edit the subtitle, did I? Oh, I did. Yeah, okay. The point is that right now I consider myself a self, okay? in this moment I'm giving a talk as a self. Like, even though I speak about the self, even though I say we're creatures of attention, between creatures, before creatures of subjectivity and objectivity, this doesn't mean the objectivity and subjectivity is not there. It just means it's not the only thing that's here. And when we're in a reality where there's deeper dimensions, to choose to define everything in accordance to one range, it's as if like you saw one color and you want to see the whole world through that color. It's like then you miss out on all the other colors. You know, many people who have ideological exist a sort of subjective, certain ideals rule their lives. In let me say it like this: certain people worshiping certain ideology, their belief systems are kind of like that one color filtering all colors. We have to realize that the mind is a very high precision instrument, and when it comes to the subjective landscape, every tiny shift can shift the meaning. That means there have been times where it's as if like I've given a talk and the talk was going a certain direction, and I've just drank a cup of hot tea, and just the temperature difference in my body changed my whole attitude to the whole subjective architecture I was entertaining. So it's as if like on some level, sure, you got to make your own surfboard in this life, but on another level, after you've made that surfboard, you got to ride the waves, realizing that your surfboard is not the only thing that's out there in the world, that the tools of man's mind are meant to be utilized in accordance to the collective vision. So what does that mean? That means usually inventors are creating stuff for individuals to use. But imagine it reaches a point where the civilization establishes a collective identity. I find it so easy. People are identifying with everything nowadays. You know, I remember reading online, I don't know, it was on this website, that in some places around the world, there are certain people who, like, you have to call them in accordance to their, like, the person feels he was an incarnation of a fox, so you got to call him like Foxkin or something. We are reaching a point where our freedoms are now bringing forth a new reality of chaos, and it's always like this. Any moment you see chaos, know that what's in the weather forecast is order. Anytime you see order, know what's in the weather forecast is chaos. This is in some sense how, if a person tries to just be good, you won't believe what kind of life they will live. Their attention is going to be on everything bad all the time. And if you live a bad life, you're trying to be a bad person, your conscience is going to crush you. There's certain ways of living in this life that are authorized by the universal sector, and there's certain ways of living that are not authorized. And you will instantly know when they are not authorized. You will instantly know when the cosmos karmically pushes you. It's like there are certain meanings that only you can extract from the elegance of your own eyes. Imagine you have access to a hidden wisdom, you know, and imagine you didn't know what this hidden wisdom was, and you found some sage, and the sage was, yo man, you have access to hidden wisdom. And the guy's like, yo, what do you mean I have access to hidden wisdom? You know, and the person's like, you have access to a pair of eyes that nobody else has. And that is what Einstein understood. Einstein was not trying to fit into the status quo. He knew evolution cannot be held back by the beliefs of man. That is always the case. We surprise ourselves even when we don't expect it. Now, to consider an objective realm and a subjective realm is a very significant thing. It's on some level a conscious fragmentation of the psyche. You can say many people in moments of their life, when they have a sort of attitude to complete something and they don't complete it, there remains a sort of emotional dissonance, right? And this emotional dissonance accumulates. And so, for example, a person can be a very gentle person in life, and many upsetting things happen, and the person is still ignoring the upset. The person is like, the world is jading their eyes, but at the same time, it's like the person is just like, okay, keep going, like, you know what I mean? So the subjective realm not only comes and goes quicker, but gives you access to many glimpses of lifetimes. And for a long time, I was there thinking about this situation until Heraclitus, God bless Heraclitus, this Greek philosopher, has had this quote that just like kind of made it clear to me. Heraclitus had this quote where he said, no man steps in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. That means, do you know that it's very hard to kind of be raised with a religious context to the world and then wonder about which sense of self is going where? Do you know? That means if you take that quote from Heraclitus, it either means you are being endless new moments of yourself, or you are being one moment that it's experiencing itself in new ways. So it means either the whole source of the manifest reality is conditional or unconditional. I have learned that the unknown is something that comes to you. It doesn't, you don't really go to it. If you go to the unknown's going to be like, what are you doing here? But I do acknowledge since my childhood, I knew there was hidden rhythms to nature. I knew there would be certain moments where the person listens to the world not with the language they have adopted. They listen to the world through their whole being, through their whole moment. Those moments are supreme, I consider. Because your archetype weeps, but your soul laughs. It's one of those moments where the fragmentation of the psyche, when it's instantly joined, it's as if the chaos and order are no longer their own worlds. You know? You kind of see it. For example, you see a martial artist, especially in movies. Just go watch some Ip Man movies. You see that the martial artist, when he's surrounded by a group of people, he has to not only occupy the forces charging at him, but he has to use the forces against one another, therefore integrating the result of two actions. So as if the martial artist pushes one guy, that one guy hits another guy, both of them fall down, then he goes to fight these two guys. The moment he hits these two guys down, those two guys have gotten up. You know what I mean? Like there's a sort of tactic, there's a sort of integrative vision. There's ways that you are alive, and it's fascinating because our ancestry was savage and we are civilized. That savageness kind of moves within us. And that savageness is not meant to externalize. So all those people in this world being violent, they can simultaneously have that intensity of expression in their subjective realms. This is why I say this is the difference between a conscious being and an unconscious being. The unconscious being, whatever happens, just like doesn't even consider it, doesn't wonder about the moment, just goes. How can I say it? Like it's kind of impulsive, Just but there is a wisdom that observes, and in its observance shifts its state of mind before entering that karmic activity. That means I want people to think that if you feel your life is happening in a certain way, like it's like there's a unique, strange karma to it, and you don't understand why it's happening, let me tell you, try this out. It's called mindfulness. It's pretty rooted in Zen. That in every moment, just be able to watch. Let yourself be the silence and stillness of the moment. Once I understand. Once you see your own presence through the stillness and silence of reality, you will reach a state of mind where it's strange. Yeah, I call it's a non-existential existence. Do you know? What it means is that you recognize the inevitable, and because you accept the world, the self can live in it. But if any moment in your psychology, before you enter an action and you have not accepted a part of that reality and that reality exists, you will be the one to find out. Do you know? That means life will push you around until you realize why you're standing. It happens. It happens. Not a lot of things make sense. You know, a lot of activities that the human being goes through throughout the day, especially with children, it starts off like this. It's emotional. You know, so imagine the animal instincts were blind, uncontrollable emotions, but the civility of man is that awareness to emotion. You cannot control anything that you cannot see. Okay, and when we ask ourselves, okay, so how do I even control the controller? How does the video game character suddenly have the same control as the person playing the video game in front of the screen? Do you know? And it's really for the video game character to realize in one dimension it is non-existent if it exists in another dimension. You cannot be somewhere else and here simultaneously unless here is inside somewhere else. That's the only way. To be honest, the true multidimensionality of reality is like an onion. It's not like a rainbow. It's not like a spectrum. It's not like beams. You know what I mean? It's not like a certain classification. So really for me, it took me a while to realize, holy shit, I've been kind of like conditioned and indoctrinated into limited words, as if my attention, my whole lifetime, it's crazy, but sometimes emotions can deny you of your own paradise, of the paradises you have built. This is why for now I'm focusing on the objective and subjective realm, but eventually as my talks progress, I'm going to get into the emotional reality a bit further. You know, and I don't want to talk too much about emotions because I need a different model to speak about it. At most, when I speak about the objective and the subjective, I can say it's a relationship between the two, you know, because in order for some, we see it like this: anything that has form has shape, has an outline. Okay, what that means is something that you cannot see the edges of, you cannot see the form, you cannot, how would I say it? You cannot, if Ludwig Wittgenstein says the limits of my language, this German philosopher says the limits of my language are the limits of my world, then beyond language, we see beyond the limits of our world. And that's my main interest. That's where I feel the civilization is heading, to a sort of silent collective expression. It's as if we realize everybody is a brush in the hand of nature, you know, and a painter's brush in the hand of nature, you know. I find that honesty gives the person access to their inner realm. Dishonesty fragments you to a point where even if you want to be honest, it's like, think of it this way. There's something called in the biological system of the being the set principle, and it means that we adjust. That means if the person just stays up at night, you know, the body will adjust to that, you know. And also there was that Nobel Prize winner that spoke about biological clocks also. Certain cyclical patterns, as if beneath our skin there's also seasons. So there is an adjustment factor. Think of it this way. Think of it that, imagine you're just a moment of sight. Imagine you're just looking through a camera. Okay? And what you see is a conditional objective realm and an unconditional subjective realm. If you are looking, if you're living as a, think of it this way: before I put my jacket on, I've put my like t-shirt on, you know, or I've put my shirt on, you know. And so it's as if we kind of put on the objective realm, we accept and we adopt objectivity as the core presence of our psychology, but we also wear a jacket over the subjectivity known as subjectivity. Okay, so really, in accordance to, so think of it this way: knowledge, the more objective we are, is linear. The more subjective we become, or the more attributeless the person is noticing attention to be, we will become a titan who never had chains. We will become the silence of existence that has an ability to generate noise. Sometimes life, the civilization may appear advanced. Right now we may feel we're like, okay, it's pretty advanced compared to like our ancestors. We're living in very advanced ways. But I find that it's kind of like it's like friends who've gone to dinner, and like a group of friends, and one person offers to buy out of politeness and expects like a polite retaliation against his will. And instead the people are like, no, he said he's going to buy it, he's going to buy it, and then the person realizes they do not have the strength to, for example, I don't know, feed 10 people at once, financially. So it becomes a kind of moment where there was an expectation, there was an acceptance of the reality, only to see its lack of fulfillment in the end, right? So I was living in this world. I'm like, okay, I go do what it's like, I felt like, all right, I go live in my corner of the universe and the cosmos is going to be okay. Just like my childhood, it's like many things I'll depend on and I'll hope they get better. It was only until karma scolded me, my own karma scolded me, that I kind of like just for a second just noticed, became sensitive to life. And your health as a human being has so much to do with how much you see you are the life before the form. Because if you identify with the form before being alive, your life is conditional. It's the same with the body, right? We say, without the body, how can I be alive? Right? But that's because we have made the meaning of life conditional to a form being animate. But the witness, like the observer, just like how there's never one person in a courtroom, like it's always various involvements. So it's I don't know. Eventually, life reveals itself to the person's mind in regards to their personal truths. It takes shape. So that means, as much as you can make what's in front of your eyes similar to what's behind your eyes, you can also make what's behind your eyes similar to what's in front of your eyes. And this is a sensitivity I'm saying that with the species requires to have, literally. You know, we're reaching a point where our mistakes are becoming uncontrollable. And what that means is, imagine you leaving, for example, what do you call it? Leaving your, what's the name? What do you call it? Imagine you leave the water running in the sink and you go to work and come back and realize the devastating damage. So it's the same with we as human beings and what's happening on the objective level and what is happening on the subjective level. The inner realms of man have a purpose. There's a reason why ignorance exists. Many people think ignorance is a bad thing. After reading 1984, you hear the term ignorance is bliss. You realize, oh my God, ignorance is a tragedy. It's like the most beautiful person being in front of you and you not seeing her. So it's like as if your mind's not even acknowledging that beauty there, right? So the era of the advanced communicators has begun. I believe we are no longer creatures of matter, and we're no longer creatures of thoughts that, as they think they're material, they make the thought hollow. Carl Jung has this remarkable quote. He says something like, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." Something like that. And what does that mean? That means the more you become materially focused, the less meaning you have even assumed to endure. This is why getting to know yourself as a being early on in life is the greatest blessing. It is greater than the greatest wealth. To realize the nature of your own eyes. That's why they call it realization. Your real eyes are required. So think of it this way, that you have no clue who you are. That's the thing. This is the why there's so much psychological clutter in civilization. Because people want to be things that are only real behind their eyes. And you have to care for the world. There's a difference, okay? The youthful mind that is, especially in a capitalistic society, raised through a competitive mindset. Like, think of what kind of world we're raising. All our sports are competitive. The economical sector is competitive. Everything has competition. Everybody's trying to excel at something. And as many people excel at the same thing, eventually the competition arises and the gladiator arenas of each profession get built in some sense. But there is an ability where I call it is the warrior's greatest strength. If I ask you what is a strong warrior, many people will probably agree the warrior that's undefeated in battle. But that warrior who's undefeated in battle looks up at another warrior, has a role model. And you know who that role model is? That warrior who could stop the war without unsheathing his blade. You see, the mind is not just a hovering idea of self. When you become attention oriented, creativity bursts. I'm not joking. Because literally the inner reality's authorization is more open. So what do I mean by this, guys? This is I could see it very clearly now. It's like, who I think I am and who I am are hovering in the same moment. That means on some chaotic level, you cannot understand yourself as a mind if you cannot see, how can I see, the void before the form. There's a reason emptiness is incredibly emphasized in Buddhism, because in order to see beyond the current limits of reality, you will have to confront the borders of the whales of thought are hollow. Did you know that? That means the transition between dimensions is kind of like, imagine a portal. Imagine like the movie, the DVD cover of the movie Stargate or something. So there's a gate. And so there's this portal. And when the person fully enters that portal and goes in, what happens? The person finds himself in a new world where, regardless of his past, imagine like half of your memories is in one dimension and half of your memories are from another dimension. And you're wondering yourself, okay, so let me see. Let me see how my thinking process was. Well, you see, it's as if at some point with that you were a concept that had accepted a certain context, the context shifted, therefore the concept had no past. No past to identify. So what that means is this whole thing about transcendence is really actually an acknowledgement of the attributeless presence of attention prior to the endless attributes and animate forces of the mind and personality. Okay. Sorry guys, I need like a 30-second intermission, but if anybody wants to say anything in the chat section, my attention's there now. Aziz BR, the more clear our inside, the more we can embody the good. Yes, but can the good exist without the bad? That has been the philosophers, one of the great Rubik's Cubes the philosophers tried to solve. And only in your acceptance of one. So you know what that means? There's never really chaos and order purely on their own. The man who knows his chaos knows his order. The man who knows his order knows his chaos. And when you attain this kind of chaotic, ordered mind, what you actually attain are wings. And so think of it this way, that there is a city in the, I write this in my science fiction novel too, guys, you know. There's it's wings. These wings take you to their corresponding world. We have a subtle psychology, the psychology of the human being. Think of it, it's as if we have two projectors projecting the same on the same wall. Okay? So two projectors simultaneously on the same wall, so we see as if one projector is simulating objective reality, the other projector is simulating subjective reality. Now while the projectors are on, there is someone watching it. And so really there is a strange parallel to watching a film and also the mystical mindset of being able to watch your whole life as a film. You become the untouchable observer of your moment. That's when you actually, you laugh as an eternal being. When you have you die, how would I say it? It's like the Sufi mystics had a good way of saying it. They said you die before you die, and they said this to this kid, and the kid was like, what the fuck? The kid was like, what do you mean I die before I die, you know? And then after a while the kid suddenly says, what do you mean there's two of me? And so this dervish is like, good, keep thinking, you know. And then the kid's thinking, okay, so there's two of me and I gotta die before I die to get enlightened, so what do I do? and really what it is that there is the objective self, and as we are schooled in existence, the subjective self emerges. If you notice, your physical body was born, but your mind is something that awoke. That means your earliest memory is an awakening. If you go really early, if you have an ability to kind of remember, or at least attempt to remember, you know. So what you see is an oscillation between the void, a chaotic void, and an ordered infinity. There are states of mind where it you realize you're never one thing. You're oscillating between your subjective dimensions and objective dimensions. That means when somebody pushes you, guess what? You feel you're oscillating more in the objective self. in the objective realm. When you know that moment when you're about to close your eyes and sleep, guess what? You're about to become enter purely your subjective realm. And there is this thing that they say, there are people who, at least in the yogic tradition, in the Ribu Gita, there was an acknowledgement of four states of consciousness. That means even though we have a conscious waking state, even though we have the dream state, even though we have the deep sleep state where there's no subjective phenomenology, we have, in some sense, the fourth state, which is the ultimate witnessing one. So really, the transcendence of man is a sort of psychological metamorphosis into a collective presence, I find. And this will require a new generation of philosophers to wonder about what it means to be an individual in a world so collectively and integratively held. Do you know, guys, how much of a fascinating discovery it was? I'll never forget that this is what I'm telling you right now, what I'm going to explain to you, was one of the most fascinating moments in this lifetime of mine. It was the moment where I watched my dream outside of my dream. And I remember sharing this experience in my very early talks, but what it was is it was the first time I noticed a dream as a screen. It was the first time I truly understood the mind is a room. The mind is a universe of its own. And what it was is, I remember, guys, it's hilarious. I had this dream where suddenly I was in this parking lot. In the dream, I was automatically moving backwards. So I'm in this parking lot. There's a car. There's a guy. There's an old man and an old woman in the car. They have a sort of Gandhi-like garb. And the guy stands up. It's like this person that kind of looks like Gandhi, strangely, you know? And the person picks up a gun and starts moving towards me, and I'm automatically in the dream being pulled backwards without, beyond my will. It's as if I'm just watching this guy kind of move towards me with the gun, and I suddenly, as I'm going backwards, I come to my bed, like I'm literally in my room, but the dream is still going on. I see the dream. I see, I see for maybe, I say for like 3 microseconds in that dream, like for a second it was like I noticed that there was a simultaneity. That means I realized I was actually dreaming while I was awake. I saw the dream. I observed the dream. So it's as if the end of the dream didn't occur to me, because as I was pulled out of the dream. Do you know? And consciousness pulls man out of his dreams. It is true. The objective realm has a superior voice that, regardless, it's like, why do you think, even if there were gods in ancient traditions, why do you think they're all watching Earth? Because this is where the party is at. You know? I pretty much noticed, guys, my mind is living a life regardless if my body is active or inactive. My attention endures. Your attention is actually one moment of being, but the contents of your attention can sequence in certain ways where you think it's an endless, infinite multidimensionality. There's been times that I've wondered about what is it that many ancient wisdom traditions kind of look down upon desire, but it's that when the person feels they deserve something, that desire is justified. And I notice it's about a certain way the world is given to the child. That means imagine the parents don't just spoon feed the child, they also spoon feed it views of the world. The child just sees how its environment is looking at the environment and adopts a mentality. I can say that a person's attention is like a pen that is in their hand. Now, some people don't want to think about what to write. They don't want to look first and then consider. They want to fit into a world that they don't even, whatever you're not a part of, you can't fit in. Let me tell you this: if you don't assume identity, you cannot identify. That's the nature of how subjectivity kind of how subjective atmospheres exist in society. So it's kind of like we have to be a person, but even though we are an experiential kind of mysterious consciousness, even scientists, they say there's a hard problem of consciousness and an easy problem of consciousness, and so we cannot explain the reasoning behind the instantaneous intentions and efforts of the creature. We can always, you see, logic and rationality requires linear time. Without time, you cannot be logical. So this is why in quantum physics, I think, scared a lot of linear theorists, that it was as if, how is it that this electron is in two locations simultaneously? How is it that the more we penetrate the secrets of the earth, we realize the mysteries we're bound to? And so it is the great honor of the human mind when it actually sees the world. when it sees how vast it is, how majestic it is. And just think about it this way, guys. I'm pretty sure everybody, if I tell you look at this cosmos and see it as lifeless, just see nothing here. You know, what that means is you just look at this and you're like, wow, just shapes and color and particles. We have to find a way to bring nature into the subconscious of the average human being as a very fundamental ideal. I call it an evolutionary return to nature. I'm writing a book on it, but it's one of those things where you'll see what sacrifice is worth and what sacrifice is worthless. And so life is not about risk management. I find there's risk in everything. Life is about sacrifice management. That there will come moments in this life where you gotta give something, and while you give it, something leaves you. You know? Something, it's strange. You cannot be animate without certain parts of the psychology becoming inanimate. You know, it's as if the person who believed in himself and then ran the marathon, that person totally, his attention denied, literally sacrificed all the inefficient senses of himself to see what his greatest self would be like. It's something you got to uncover. I feel the world is missing a new mythology, and our technologies have taken the spotlight of our own attention from ourselves. You see, I find it's a race between the technological vision and the natural vision in finding out the collective self first. Either technologically, we will, as a species, be introduced to a sense of collective being. What that means is a bunch of people plug their heads to a computer. You know, that's a collective being, you can say. Or the person goes and sits in nature and realizes their biological existence is an antenna for the whole cosmic landscape. So you stop, like imagine you turned on the radio, you're on a car driving on a road trip, and you turn on the radio, you're changing the channels of the radio from a dial, one of those old school kind of car radios. And as you're kind of changing the channel, you suddenly come to a channel where it's as if you're not an individual being having access to an individual world. You become the world in the person. Right now, the consciousness of the human design is identifying as a person in a world. You become the world in the person. You see that world is as alive as the self is. You see that every memory is like a kind of soldier following their commander, the present moment, into the next kind of battlefield of reality. So, on some level, we can keep it very simple. You as a human being require an ability to navigate simply. Sometimes the sense of self will be simple, sometimes the world will be complex. Sometimes the world will be simple, the sense of self will be complex. We find this actually in the psychology of those human beings who dedicate their life to knowledge. You see the scholar, imagine like an incredible athlete and an incredible scholar. And let us imagine their incredible careers. And we see that the scholar has been, in some sense, exercising the mental capacity of entertaining various visions. And in some sense, we can see the athlete has been mastering the ability in one vision. Right, so there are, let's say, hilariously, we can say there are masters of the void, there are single masters, those will master single dimensions, and then there are the multidimensional masters. And the multidimensional masters are the student and the master simultaneously. They're the ever-present updates. They're an archetype that is a glitch in the system. It's as if it's the life giver cannot die. The attention that awakens, it's not that attention that brings sleep. And this is a fascinating idea that in the morning you're someone, and at night when you're about to sleep, you're somebody else. Because the journey of the day changed you. And if we are really data processing creatures, really just knowledge can be absorbed in many ways. I personally have this very firm view that the mind is such an advanced phenomenon, guys. Our intelligence is incredibly advanced. I'll tell you this is all inclusive. That means everybody's intelligence is so ridiculously high off, but the way we have designed the game of life, our game of life is not requiring it. You know, it's as if like you are the greatest warrior, but there's literally no battlefield. You're just walking on a simple road. It's as if all that ability is there, yet it is not being externalized. Right? And now in our current modern era, we no longer need physical warriors. We need warriors of the mind. We need eyes that care for their world before the flame of a civilization goes extinguishes. By the way, guys, I encourage the audience to, like, this isn't a one-man show. Feel free to share comments, like, you know, just very straight and direct comments on the content you hear, you know. In the meeting of lions, all roars are welcome, you know. I don't know why recently, guys, it's been like 2 days where the lion imagery is too much around me, you know. The mind is an instrument, and if you think you're the instrument, you can't play it properly. You have to have faith then. You can say faith is the last option. And it doesn't mean that you should not have faith. And I'm not talking about faith in the religious sense, even though the concept arises from a religious context. But I'm saying faith is, you see, your eyes are open and there's something here, and you either trust this or you don't. And if you trust your eyes, the world will open up to you. The world will run to you. But if you don't trust your eyes, then in some sense, how can you see? The easiest thing in life is to break something. It's so easy. It's so easy, for example, pushing something off a table. pushing a glass cup from a table. It's super easy. But to create a glass cup, do you know how long that takes? Do you know that poor man had to kind of like, back in the day, you know, how much the flame would kind of like wrinkle his forehead through time? It is no longer about just the world we live in. It's about the worlds that live in us and to be aware of them. And there is no greater power. There's no greater power than self-realizing it is awareness. And awareness realizing it is an unconditional momentum, movement. It's like, can you go up to an eagle and compare that eagle to the human species and be like, this eagle is stupid? You know, can you go up to an eagle and call an animal stupid? You know, we see no. Nobody calls a animal stupid. Nobody looks at an insect and it's like, look at this stupid creature. We don't measure it by their intelligence. We measure it by the influence of their expression. And so what life is asking, like, do you know how much this changed my psychology, guys? That I realized, oh my God, the whole like many traditions are kind of just saying, especially the Abrahamic context, which was kind of like the first waves of information that came to me. I consider a person's life to be like your eyes open and waves of data and information just hit you, and you choose to identify with how the moment feels to you. You know. You know, in a strange way to say, if one was to debunk emotion, one would see that it's only the future. Emotions without a future cannot exist. If the person doesn't care about the future, they will not be emotional. Emotions require a freedom that has not yet been attained. It's like the person is seeing the heaven on top of the mountain, and you know, from the bottom of the mountain is like, I don't know how to say it. It's like you know, it's a strange moment when the person realizes that the landscape is alive. Imagine our civilization right now. Everybody like looked at the ground, and for a second we're like, whoa. And we realized our whole civilization was on the back of a giant turtle. Now, there would be some people in that civilization who would run to kind of touch the turtle's neck to get a sense of how their world is alive and moving. Do you know? And you got to feel nature. You know, it's kind of like putting your hand on the ground and hearing the thumps of all the buffaloes that are running in the distance. Do you know? And so it's as if you in some sense begin realizing that the language of nature is the language of flow. And Lao Tzu talking about Taoism is like a spaceship landing, an ideological spaceship landing. Like Taoism is ridiculously, it's like sometimes I feel like Lao Tzu, how do I say it? Some people in history, they kind of appear as if they're from the future. Their insights are so universal, they remain till the future. And really, we have to understand language is our own clay. We discovered language like we discovered fire. We discovered just like how we could smash two rocks to one another, to spark a flame. Similarly, we realized we can smash a subject with an object and create a moment, create a story out of it, you know. And that is the realm of language. So on some level, yes, we have sophisticated professors giving lectures, but on some level, we're like the cavemans, and like, smashing rocks together and like hitting sticks together or something, you know? I honestly think fire was because of lightning. Lightning hit a branch. The caveman was like, whoa, this is shiny. Held it in his hand, ran, accidentally threw it on a bunch of bushes, and the whole thing caught fire. Everybody took the fire, and at least just somehow, I don't know. Somehow there was continuity. Lightnings, you could say, could happen often. It's very fascinating that when you look at the geography of the planet, when you look at the climate of the planet, but when you look at the electromagnetic fields of the planet, it's like the electromagnetic field, maybe it has to just do with the mass of the thing. But I'm just saying it's like in an electromagnetic view, what story is there? So you see, science and philosophy will always cross swords because philosophy is trying to defend the preservation of an unknown freedom of the mind's wonder, and science is trying to preserve the stability of what is really here. Do you know? So it's as if we have two great warriors, the philosopher and the scientist, and they are, if they are left with each other, they will fight each other. But if they are recruited both for a greater vision, for the efficiency of a greater vision, then in some sense you can say to be part of a greater influence is the validation the subconscious seeks. You want to live here before you transition out of here, before the attention moves beyond the lessons of the manifest. I remember in 2014 when I was giving these talks, it was such a unique time of my life. I was in Birmingham, UK, and I don't know. I just one day decided to give. I was like, okay, let's try it. And I had this vision of just giving 10,000 talks. I'm like, okay, but what would happen if I didn't? Like, so I started going on this kind of thing where I would have my phone and I would go sit. I would go sit in the yard, like there was a nice bench, strange kind of solo square-like bench, and I would go sit on it, and in some sense, as I'm sitting there, kind of like, I would take out my phone, and then I would just notice certain ways thoughts are arising, and I would just communicate it. And eventually it reached a point where I noticed I have been an observer of everything I've ever said. I am the responsibility of my life's vitality. That means my life is my responsibility. When I realized that, like meaning changed, artificial living changed. Not being yourself made less sense than being yourself. It was as if the simple gave you wings, but the complexity was building tunnels. So you see, it's like a winged creature must not move through a tunnel. So similarly, it's like we must maximize the ability, and I thought about it. It's pretty much like every day I've been thinking about it. But I'll say before I go march into the future. I'll tell you this before I fly into the future, guys. In that moment in 2014, I remember I had a sort of kind of, it was bad financial weather. And I remember I was living such a simple life. I was fasting a lot. And I had this, what do you call it? This cup. Like this, you know, there was this kind of like free tea part of this accommodation place, and I would just go get a tea before I would give my talks, you know. And this is in Birmingham, UK, and the accommodation was called Curzon Gateway, but now I think the whole place has been destroyed, and it is probably just the story of it lives on in this talk, you know. I would take my tea and I would sit there. I don't know, guys. Sometimes when life is super simple, the complexity of the illusion is no longer desired. And so I remember I reached an incredibly, like many moments in my life, people, I don't know how people do it. I don't know how people have dreams all the time, how they have ambitions all the time. I have certain moments in life where I'm just pure preferenceless. It's as if I have no opinion on my own opinions, you know? It's just I'm kind of like, there are some times where I feel I am the silence and the stillness of the moment as much as I am the noise and the movement in it. So in that simplicity, guys, I remember I had these I had these Apple like earphones, and I remember just pressing the record button and just using the voice memo app on my phone. You know, there wasn't Wi-Fi in the yard. So I remember just pressing record and sitting there and having this kind of like personal thing. When ideas would strike me, I would go and sit down and just talk about them, you know? And I remember it was strangely one of the, in regards to my physical well-being, a kind of difficult time, but it was the best time of my life. It was a moment where, just like when I give these talks, it was like as if I was alive. I don't know how to tell you guys. It was like I was alive there. It was as if there was, my mind's intention was greater than my body's suffering. Imagine suddenly something becoming so important for you, you don't care about your own suffering anymore. No, it doesn't mean you be careless. I'm just saying, like, always make the greatest decision, you know? Climb the mountain by starting at the top. But I'm telling you, like, in that moment in my life, I had to, it's never been difficult to accept the moment, because really the moment changes. So if somebody puts something in front of you and they're like, accept this as truth, it's like, guess what? It's going to change. So all our beliefs are only held static behind our eyes. In reality, changes the ultimate law, you know? So when you realize that universal law of change, you calm down as a being. Your psychology doesn't suffer anymore for itself, because it realizes it's an opportunity. When you realize life is an opportunity, it's like, why waste the attention on suffering? You know? It's like, sure, there's any moment you can find suffering. You know, you can walk bare feet on like tiles and be like, I'm suffering. You know, so it's like you can see suffering in that tiny thing, you know. But imagine your ancestors like not even having shoes, like out, like, you know. It's like a hobbit would look at you and be like, shame, man, you know. It's like people nowadays are weak. Yeah. So there was something there, guys. There was something where I felt I was pursuing a mysterious opportunity of my life by trusting something that arose from my personal realm, my personal truth, rather than just purely my objective truth. Because I found it too complex, guys. There was a time where I did care when I was much younger, this is like pre-2011, where I cared how the world really saw me, right? I was sensitive. There was a sort of insecurity because of all the unknown factors that could arise, right? But then I reached a point where I'm like, why am I creating people's sight? Why am I assuming I can see through their eyes? And when I realized I couldn't, I saw the value of people. It is not in our differences or in our commonality that we are advanced. It's just that it's like we are natural beings, so it's how would I say it, like, it's like realizing your eyes are the eyes of nature before you learned language. So you see what I mean about like direct experience? There is an experiential presence here. Now we try to contain it in everything. You know, I find it hilarious sometimes. Like, certain ideas arise that even like it makes myself laugh. You know, and and there was this idea where I'm like, holy shit! There was a time. This was the first time I remember I got introduced to the concept of idol worship, and I was like, holy shit! There were people who would look at an object and be like, "That's truth." They would like freak out. They thought their god was an object. And guess what happened? Some people came and slapped those objects out of those people's hands, and they were like, holy shit, the object broke. How could it be God? And suddenly there came what? The next search, as if even though idol worship stopped, but the desire to find the truth did not stop. And so that desire, I find, especially arising from the it's just pretty much, you can say religions were language worship. But they were also the seeds that helped civilization's development. That means you don't know, but it's like it was very incredible to kind of notice this, that it's like a lot of art in culture was like the cathedrals in towns were tried to be made to be the like kind of, or like it's like the town had shitty houses and there was suddenly this giant cathedral there. You know what I mean? Like the art was preserved through significance. So you got to realize that history didn't. The only reason we human beings have a history is kind of like because people cared to pass on stories. Now, from a philosophical angle, I would say we find ourselves in a strange situation. Because if we realize we're not, the objective self requires a subjective self, because without a subjective self, whose body is this? You know, so you need the subjective self. Okay, so it's like, okay, there's an objective self, there's the subjective self, and then you reach close to the language threshold where the unknown moves knowledge rather than the known containing the unknown. And that's when it's like Carl Jung set out so many psychologists and so many people, wondrous explorers of the unconscious, and he says like, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and call it fate. So what is he saying? He's telling people, go get to know the unknown dimensions of your mind, right? And so people are running to wonder about the true nature of reality, you know? But the thing that Carl Jung didn't say, how? He said what to do. He didn't say how. And I'll tell you something here. This is kind of Mr. Within's response on the how. Okay? The how is as the consciousness It's like, all right, unconscious, I'm gonna explore and I'm gonna see what this is, what life really is. You know, that explores vision, right? The explores spirit. So, inspiration. So, as we step towards the unconscious, as you understand more about the world, you will come to realize ultimately the consciousness is the unconscious. So what we consider unconscious could be the conscious dimension of a totally different reality. That means just because we think their life is not standing here, it doesn't mean the world is not standing with the world. It doesn't mean the world is not alive. You know, it's like just because you can't see your brain, does it mean you don't have a brain? I consider just like how Venice was built, the linguistic simulation, the realms of language that we dwell in as a species, were built on pillars of static experiences, which meant images. So it's strange, but even though we go and see libraries filled with such content, you know, great libraries, but we see what it's like, wait a minute, knowledge is not a linear thing. That means the man who wanted to know beyond time found himself to never be in a hurry. Sometimes people are actually not living for themselves. I find that the language worship is continuing, and it's even gone to a point where people are worshiping the language that they think is their future self in the moment. And so, do you know how relaxing it is to, for a second in this life, not have to constantly be something? There's a strange relaxation that comes with it. That it's like you have an ability to pick up the tool, but it doesn't mean the tool should be in your hand 24/7. It doesn't mean you should just remain in one state of mind because you think heaven is there. We are a creature where our even our brain, let's look at it objectively. What is it? It's like a cup with liquid in it. You know, so when the person is running in some sense, you know, what is, for example, a concussion? It's when the brain hits the skull. So it's like it's when there's movement, neurochemical influences. A person running will have a different texture of ideology than a person who's sat down. So what does that mean? That means in on some level we have to be aware of the various states of mind we're living in. So it's like, think of it this way: we have two people, imagine, looking at each other and saying, Namaste, I acknowledge the God within you, and you acknowledge the God within me. Hippie, you know, like it's all good, you know. But what does that mean? That ultimately means you are a unique expression of a state of mind, a field of mind. You are a unique particle moving in your own field of mind, and others are a unique particle. And the unknown is divinity. That means, I'll tell you an example. Like there was back in the day, you know, there were villages and towns, and it was the reality. There weren't even roads yet. You know, people had to journey for days. Journeys were long. Do you know? People had to take even a bunch of horses. So so the thing would be, imagine a town where for like centuries nobody has visited, and suddenly out of nowhere one person visits. All the people in the town would be like, holy shit, this is a miracle. A new expression of humanhood has come in view. This is why on some level, like, you gotta pull yourself out of the dirt of your own conception. If you can't give yourself a chance, trust me, life will never give you a chance. If you can't forgive yourself, life will never forgive you. And if you cannot save yourself, life will not save you. There, you have free will. If you were an animal, if you were an inferior species, if I was talking to, like, for example, like, you know, a lesser animal, like, this lesser animal has no control, but because we have control, that means we choose. Because we choose, because we are here, it means that the purpose of the design is the implementation of the free will. That means the more you live as yourself, the more you are actually animating in the world naturally. And we have to understand, really, the social fabric of civilization, even though I speak about all these structures to the intellectual approaches of the civilization, but let me tell you, really what is going to save and bring all human beings into a neutral view of looking at things anew is emotional stability. It's like that dictator, that savage, chaotic leader of whatever chaos around the world, you know? It's as if somebody, it's as if his grandchild comes up to him, you know? Or let's say his son comes up to him and puts his hand on his father's shoulder and looks at his father and says, stop. And it's as if the chaos of generations suddenly, for a second, no longer is bound to what it thinks it has to be. You free yourself before even being chained. That's moksha. Oh man, I feel like I should share a story here. Let's see what's a good story. Guys, I'll give a playful option because there's this is a live stream, so I can create a story, you know, that kind of to demonstrate my point, or I can find the story from other times, like an actual story that's passed down. So which one would the audience want? You know, like I'm kind of curious. You know. Okay. Hey everybody, I'm back. The coffee took a while. To be honest, I can't kind of. I think it's more exciting for me to share a news story, and eventually, I think by the end, I'll share another story that hits both options. But anyways, let's say a caterpillar meets a butterfly, and the caterpillar interviews the butterfly. And the caterpillar keeps asking this butterfly, how can I become like you? How can I become like you? What kind of secret technique do I need to become like you? You know? How do I get wings? And the butterfly tells the caterpillar, you will know when you're ready. You will know when it's your time. And the caterpillar's like, what is this bullshit? The caterpillar becomes, in some sense, hopeless and feels there's no solution. And he feels that some people are lucky that they're butterflies, and some caterpillars, it's like they don't change. Imagine, from the viewpoint of the caterpillar. And the caterpillar suddenly one day realizes that everything of his reality will crumble, and as the last image of reality remains, as the last image of reality leaves, the image of a new reality begins. So the same metamorphosis that is happening strangely to a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, as the last cell of the caterpillar dies, the cell of the butterfly emerges. I find it's the same with manifest subjective reality. As the subjective reality, the last subjective cell of that reality, the last self of an old world dies, the new self of a new world stands. You know. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Transformation is key. I find the relationships we have in the moment, obviously they change, but we can also direct and administer their change. That means man does not just have an ability to explore the unknown, but he has an ability to also interpret the unknown. And when he understands the state of exploration and the state of interpretation are two different states, eventually society will kind of be a skill oriented. That would be a great civilization, really, where people are celebrated for a skill set. You see, the fascination for human living. I kind of found what Shakespeare did to be phenomenal. That for him, theater was a way of showing the world to itself, showing a different world to itself, showing a different world to the world. And in the yogic tradition, there's a concept called Leela, the play, when you have to understand this is a kind of law of nature, that there are forces at play. Now, some of these forces are in conscious control and you can navigate, and certain forces are not. The force of your biological body, yes, your attention can navigate it. But the force of like the body of like a pigeon in the sky, you can't control it. So you know what I mean? So there is something like that where there's many ways a person can deceive their self. Imagine being a titan chained and realize you're the god that chained you. The conditional acceptance of a reality, that is the worst shackle. That only one, it's as if you're in life, and imagine just like how we have like the carrot stick, the carrot connected to the rope to the stick connected to the head of the mule, so the mule's chasing the carrot endlessly, chasing its false paradiso, you know. And imagine there was a portrait. Imagine there was a stick behind everybody's back, you know, with more right angles, I guess, for the and there was a painting in front of your eyes, and your whole life went by and you were just looking at that painting. You never pushed that painting aside, that ideological perspective, to see what there is more than that. Who knows? You know, your eyes may be the first to enter the dimensions of your universe, you know. To study the occurrence of thought, that's a symptom of a civilization getting ready to become advanced. To study the various dimensions of intelligence and then learning how to navigate them. It's not just enough to kind of bring berries to the people. You know, it's like, imagine the first person in a tribal kind of hunter-gatherer kind of society, the first person who finds berries. It's like, holy shit, I just found berries. The tribe should know. And imagine these are good berries. The guy got lucky, didn't know about poison berries yet. You know, so they get this berry, and the guy takes like a bunch of berries and he goes to the tribe, and the tribe's like, holy shit, what is this? You know, and he's like, these are berries, you know. And so it's like a guy named Barry found them, so it's like, yeah, these are berries, you know. But anyways, so so the second task was to build a route. We have to find a way to get back to the berries. You know, we have to find a way to find civilization's ancient hidden values and why mythology is so influential. And that the modern time, there is no mythology. People don't feel great being alive. They feel the opposite due to the harshness of their economical conditions, maybe their political systems. Do you know how many countries outside of Western civilization are very inhibited? Literally, it's as if the thoughts of the people in the nations are being kind of censored overall by the identity of the nation. So it becomes one of those things where what is freedom in a world where everybody's trying to hold their own banner? Right? So it means that the freedom has to come beyond banners. It has to, as Albert Einstein says, you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that you created it. That means the same eyes that you are seeing suffering with are not going to be the same eyes where you move beyond the suffering. It's going to be different. And so to be able to acknowledge change above and beyond, and even bottom and below. Life is fascinating. I have concluded that if you are an individual conscious being, you have to pilot through this plane of existence, and you have to first pilot your mind. And as you get comfortable realizing why the mind is here, how the mind is being the whole moment, how free will is light in your eyes, so that like there comes a significance to the world that we as human beings have. I consider, I say many stories, but I consider we have not found the greatest stories. The greatest stories are like treasures hidden still in the civilization's advancement in the linguistic direction. So on some level, I'm telling people, listen, stop worshiping language, maintain your distance, understand it's a technology, then you will understand how to use it experientially. So it's like being grounded and rooted in your experience. And when you are, it becomes really simple, because the moment you experience a reality that is non-image, that has nothing to do with image, your attention is no longer centering around storylines. Literally, you don't care what story life has. It doesn't mean you don't have any story. It doesn't mean you don't have ambitions and visions. It just means you are mindful of how thoughts arise. On some level, you witness them, watch them as they occur. You give freedom to your mind as the world has given freedom to you. Do you know? And so by doing this, you realize it's kind of like we say, every person on earth who's helped another human being, any person, they were on some sense, they had no idea who they were helping, but they just for that moment felt they were doing something, they were serving their own moment of existence in subconsciously, because their mind is being their whole moment. So you see, when you're violent in the moment, guess what? You're being violent to your mind. I'm not joking, because your mind is not just being the self in the moment, it is also being the world. Even this in the child psychology, I consider the child is like, I even have it, like I personally justify it, but it's like the child is not a self first. It's the mind is first recording its environment. It's like pressing the record button as the person attains consciousness, So imagine the doctor smacking the child in the back for its first breath is literally like pressing the record button, and the child's consciousness engages, activates. Now that intelligence, that alertness, that unique vision of energy, you can say, is something where it's not a self yet. I mean, of course, the biological program occurs. That means it's like a young child has less opinions on life than, in some sense, a person who has really, really ran laps around the sun. So it becomes one of those things where you have, every person has their own eyes, true, but what we see seems to be similar. We are just pretty much a bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And we have no greater thing. That means if you really, I think the atheists are not really atheists, because if they were, they would freak out. Sorry, not atheists, materialists. Materialists. Pure materialists. So pure materialists, because there are certain atheists like Sam Harris, who is spiritual atheist. But I don't know. Language is worn in many ways in many parts of the world. But I'm just saying that we have to start developing the ego of the civilization in a new light. That's it. And I've thought about it, and it's devastating because on one level, I'm like, what if all the nations on the world had no borders? What if? Like, I was just trying to visualize it. For a second, I was like, okay, there's no borders. We're all one nation. And then I'll be like, one nation, in some sense, like, what would a free, liberated like if we literally didn't have borders anymore? All resources were everywhere for everyone. Somehow, imagine we created AI, and AI was like, don't worry, human beings, I got this. With the Italian accent the AI speaks. you know and the AI instantly changes and allocates all the resources equally everywhere in the world, where there is no longer anybody suffering. Do you know, it's kind of strange. Some people say it's like, what if I'm an eternal being and suffering is just excitement? There are certain schools of thought that take it that far, where they even consider, how is it that if I'm an eternal being and endlessly reincarnating, like what, do you know what I mean? Like the guy, the person's like, okay, let me think this through. I'm endlessly reincarnating as an eternal transmigrating soul that is the will of the universe. Let me think about this. And the person suddenly realizes it's like, is this like the foolishness of an eternal being to try to temporarily survive? That means I'm like, who has pressed play on this film that is my life? And that question took me beyond the language threshold. There's certain moments in life that you can suddenly be thrown beyond the language threshold. An example of it would be Sri Ramana Maharshi. Sri Ramana Maharshi, this kid when he was young, Sri Ramana Maharshi is a very respected and liberated sage. He's one of the most, I consider, important people to know about in the world. One of the like top, like maybe like even like up there, okay? And Sri Ramana Maharshi, when he was a young kid, look at this kid's mentality. It's kind of strange. Like, he was definitely a different kid. He's like, he hears about the concept of death, and he sits down and closes his eyes and just lays there. And he lays there so long to see what death is like. As a little kid, he's like, imagine a young kid doing this. And the kid's lying down on the ground trying to see what death is, and suddenly he realizes the self. He realizes his eyes are here. And there's no greater liberation. What greater liberation can there be? Free will is free. I'm going to share now the story, which was the second option, as I wrote in the chat section. I forget the man's name, but it was a story where, think of it this way, the story is being said by a devout disciple of this enlightened guru, and one day this guy with a big ego, as if, all right, this is a business Mongol billionaire who's decided to become an enlightened person, so he's suddenly come here to the monastery, So imagine one of the guys in Dragon's Den, suddenly going to India into an ashram and commanding enlightenment from the people, It's like, give me my enlightenment, with whipped cream. Oh man, that's too silly. Okay. This person, the disciple, is sharing the story. It's in an Indian Vedic context. And this story is good insight into, I find, the kind of cultures that are alive in the world. Every nation, every culture, every behavior of every human being there and representing your species. Do you know? That means if you for a second thought 8 billion people were your family members, how would you treat humanity? Do you see that? That's next level. That means how much would you care for that person's mind who you have no idea who it is? There's 8 billion of us, of course. It's like there will come byproducts of illusion. But anyways, back to the story. This guy comes into the ashram, and this disciple, and among the other disciples and the guru, just watch this guy. And the guy comes in there and he says, you have to give me, just instantly, he says, you have to give me a mantra. If you are enlightened, if you say you know the truth, if you say you have seen the eyes of God, in some sense, you have to give me a mantra. Give me a mantra right now, The guy has this strange, stubborn ego. It's as if the ego is too stubborn that the guy's like, okay, maybe this is like some divine thing, So what happens is the guru says, okay, calm down, and the guy's silent. And the guru sits down in some sort of meditative kind of reception, and as if he's like trying to tune in to see, okay, let's see what news there is. Let's see what the cosmos wants today, And the guru stands up. He looks at him and he says this sacred mantra. And he says, okay, this is what I got for you. And the guy takes the mantra and he's like, thank you. He suddenly, his behavior, his ego's got what he wanted. Like some people, like they're weak when it's like they get animalistic desire, and you give him that desire, you see they suddenly calm down, and you realize how like insecure that person was, sometimes some people acting strong are actually the weakest people. You're only as strong as you know your weaknesses. Anyways, so this guy suddenly, his behavior changes, and he's like, okay, I got the sacred mantra, and he goes to a room, and the disciple is telling the story. It's like some next level stuff happens, because this guy doesn't leave this room for 1 week, and every time people go in there to take him something like food or whatever, right, the guy's just saying mantra. Like the guy's become some kind of like chanting, sacred mantra chanting machine, like Rama 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 Rama, like, you know what I mean? Like the guy was saying mantras to such a next level. And he's saying this mantra, and after a week, the disciple says the guy comes out of the room and there's a strange kind of like atmosphere about him. It's as if there's definitely something different, as if like his soul maybe took a small shower, like, and you know, the guy steps out of the room, and I think the mantra had to do with Brahman, and what happens is the guy comes out of the room and he's walking very gentle, and there's no signs of like his ego anymore, his savage kind of demanding ego. And he looks up to the first person and he sees, and he's like, I see Brahman in you. And he walks up to the other person and he's like, I see Brahman in you, and then the other guy, and eventually the guru's like, what the fuck? The guru is not convinced, to be honest, in this story. The guru is not convinced, and the disciples are like, holy shit. Some of the disciples believe this guy's like enlightened, liberated, unshackled by karma. So what happens is that for a second the guru thinks, and he's like, okay, let's the guru has this intuitive feeling as if something's off, right? And he suddenly gets this idea that he gets this bag of like groceries or something, and he gives the guy, and he gives the guy a basket, and he's like, go to the grocery store and get vegetables, and he gives the money to the guy too. The money's already in the basket. right? And he's like, go get vegetables for the whole thing, and let's celebrate your new your who you have become, you know. And so it's as if like even the guru is saying, okay, I don't know if this guy, maybe this guy is actually realized, you know. And so the guru is you know, there's no longer, there's a pause of judgment there. Anyways, what happens is the guy who got enlightened and sees Brahman and everything is walking towards the market, and like a dog runs beside him, and he's like, I see Brahman in that dog, you know. And he walks, and he sees a leaf fall from a tree, and he's like, I see Brahman in this leaf. And then a guy runs from market, like he suddenly sees a bunch of people are running from the marketplace, and one guy runs to him, grabs him, shakes him, and he's like, hey man, there's an elephant there that's crazy, don't go there. You know, there's an elephant in the vegetable section, you know? Who knew elephants like broccoli, you know? You know, the guy's like, don't go there, there's a crazy elephant there, you know? And this guy's like, he puts his hand on the bewildered guy's shoulder, and he's like, don't worry, bro. I see Brahman in that elephant. That's Brahman. I got this. You know, I got enlightened power. I got this, you know? And the guy, oh man, the guy goes, he's walking in the marketplace, and there's no sign of the elephant. And he goes very gently, and he sees the elephant is there. And he's like, I see Brahman in this elephant. And he goes and picks up the vegetables, and one by one, as he's filling up the basket, he's like, I see Brahman in these vegetables. Do you know? He's actually seeing God in everything. So in that moment, he suddenly picks up and he sees the elephant is like right beside him. And the elephant is staring at him with a rage, as if it's blaming all its anger and frustration on this guy. You know? And so, because animals don't have judgment, guys, you know? So the elephant is looking at this guy, and this guy's like, I see Brahman, you know, in you, and I see Brahman in myself, elephant. And in that moment, the elephant does the unthinkable and gives into its animalistic instincts and grabs the guy, and like, you know, there's this horrible incident that occurs that the guy kind of gets thrown and kind of injured, you know, and he goes unconscious, you know. For a little while, and then suddenly like they take him to the hospital and whatnot, you know. The elephant, like the elephant was actually crazy, you know. Or maybe the elephant was just, you know, playing its part, who knows. So anyways, the guy, next day, it's like the guru's like, where are the vegetables? You know, everybody, all the disciples are like, holy shit, where's our dinner? The next day, the guy comes with, you know, he had certain minor injuries, you know, nothing too major, and he comes with, of course, like a cast and like, you know, a neck brace or something, you know. And he comes and he gets angry, and his ego suddenly comes as if nothing's changed, and he's like, the mantra you gave to me didn't work, you're not enlightened, you're not liberated, you know, this is all a scam, you know, like, you know. Fuck metaphysics, you know. Sorry guys, I'm taking this too far. Anyways, the guy's upset. The guy says to the guru, what is this? It didn't work. And the guru looks at him, and he says to the guy, tell me what happened. And he's like, I actually saw Brahman and everything, and I don't understand why the elephant crushed me, you know. And the guy said, you saw Brahman in everything except the guy that told you not to go to the market. And the guy suddenly is like, holy shit, you know. It's like that moment where Jon Snow realizes he knows nothing, you know. It's like, holy shit. So, yeah, that's the story, guys. And just to say a few things about the title before I end off, unless anybody has something they want me to comment on. Each unhidden self holds a hidden world. Pretty much, guys, the inspiration for the title was that I realized we are experiencing ourselves as different states of mind, therefore different states of self. And because we're experiencing different states of ourself, with each self, it simultaneously comes a world. A self cannot exist without a world, or it is not a self. It is either the void or the infinite. So you see, so it's like learning from the architecture of not only how your intelligence appears to you, it's realizing the hidden and the unhidden, realizing that life is not something that has to be known 100%. You can't know it really. What you can know is you can live it, and as you live it consciously, the consciousness, you at least experience conscious evolution while you're here. And I am seeing that the pattern is that the conscious evolution is leading towards a new requirement for a collective narrative. That means Mr. Within is kind of calling all writers and philosophers in the world to help develop the new global narrative. A story in which the human being awakens is honored by. Honor is something that was very real in modern civilization due to its mistakes, due to its sin. I don't want to say sin. Let me say due to its guilt, it doesn't allow. Sometimes people are cruel, not because their nature is cruel, is because they have just had they've experienced cruelty, and that's what they feel is like the pattern to display. It's like not every person cares about justice. Not every person cares about balance. Not every person can ride a surfboard. But those who can, there comes a responsibility that in your stability you recognize the collective vision, because the greatest vision of an individual is a collective vision. What that means is Meister Eckhart 1,000 years ago, this Christian Gnostic, understood it. One of those priests who would put skulls on the table to contemplate life and death often. He said, the same eyes I see God are the same eyes God sees me. In other words, a philosophical rebellion against Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, where the finger of God and the finger of man are not touching. But that space in between is the reality between, is the point that connects it all. So it's as if our eyes are right now being governed in accordance to like a mass. We are a biological entity. So it's being interpreted based on this. So right now, for maybe the next 200 years, a lot of activities, a lot of people were thinking of what kind of businesses to start in the future. You got to look at well-being, because the world has made so many mistakes that really it's going to, I think all the businesses that are going to succeed are going to be healing businesses. Those are the ones that endure a world that's hurting itself nonstop. Because it's kind of crazy now. It's crazy to think that, okay, oh my, like the psychology of the person can reduce in self-worth to themselves to such a degree where they are even willing to hurt themselves. Like, so this is something I'm not proud of, but I could tell you in 2009. In 2009, I found myself in such a kind of, I would say, self-destructive state of mind. As a sort of strange depression that had no boundary of like in my mind I was breaking myself endlessly. I was devaluing every moment of my existence because I was upset in one moment. It's as if I was repainting my whole life as a mistake. My whole existence is as if one pattern was missed, and it's as if like the melody can never be perfect again. So there was many kind of mindsets in my vision, but I remember I was so upset at how life was not occurring the way my inner reality was, that I had even become numb to my body. And I remember it was at that point I didn't smoke, and I had a cigarette in my hand, and I would I put I'm telling you, I'm not proud of, but this is something that happened. I put the cigarette on the side of my hand, on the side of my hand, and for a second it was as if I felt so purposeless that the pain felt real. And it was a strange thing. And I kind of realized really what it is we are dying inside if we don't get to live outside. And that's a hilarious thing, which has to do with a sort of ancient cultural programming. And I remember in that moment, I had let go of my betterment. You know, I find every moment in your life you have access to a chaotic vision and an ordered vision, or a chaotic interpretation and an ordered interpretation, or you can say a great action and let's say a weak action. You know, efficient action and inefficient action. So it sometimes you need to be patient in the moment, and then the efficient action will automatically come. Sometimes you may not find the efficient action. You may be too impulsive, or what's the term, compulsive or something, and you might just sometimes hunger. Like, let's hope when a person's mind is more hungry than their body, they see more out of life. When a person's body is more hungry than their mind, they're too busy to see life. But I got to tell you guys something. Like, when I said in 2014 I would fast, there was a thing about fasting that it's strangely, like, fasting 1 day out of a week is like, and just drinking water to just cleanse the system is strangely helpful, you know? I guess I would finalize the direction of the talk towards just an acknowledgement that there is intelligence being a moment. And this intelligence being a moment gives the individual an access to a personal dimension and an impersonal dimension. The impersonal dimension is a collective responsibility, so every individual member of the civilization should care for the civilization's advancement, not just their own. And on some level, the person is living an inner life that nobody else sees. You know, sometimes they embody that inner life while they're singing in the shower, let's say. Guy, just to respond to the comment section, you know, I find when the source of existence is considered never to have a start or an end, not to be dualistic, to be inconceivable, you got to think about it pretty much. I think this is the view. Some people are looking at reality and they are feeling the cause of reality is known, and some people are feeling the cause of reality is unknown. And if you truly feel, if you truly, this is, I think, if a person does not abide by this, then I don't know why the concept of religion is being adopted. Do you know? That it, in some sense, you have to acknowledge the creation of all of it, right? So it's like ideologies are just vehicles. It is your experience, it is your real eyes that are the eyes of judgment, the eyes that will be judged, at least if you bask in a kind of, you know, 6th century garb of language. You know, like people inhabit many ideological structures. You know, we can even say I once thought about it. You know, because I've been to not only like mosques, churches, or even like Zen temples. Strangely, in my life, I've kind of found myself visiting a lot of these places. And what I realize is, as if there is a value, a virtue, a sort of something more than everything else that is pulling the person. So what it is a promise. So in some sense, when it's kind of like we got to be careful that ideology doesn't become escapism from the actual life we're meant to live. You know, it's as if people thinking that they have to follow a certain ideology to find a sort of liberation is like doubting God's initial creation. It's like, do you know what I mean? Before the voice of, before revelation, it was as if the creation of the creator, before the concept of the creator even, was just existing. Do you see? It's as if there were no mistakes until we defined them. So my relationship is, guys, I say this often, is I don't believe language can hold the truth. It doesn't mean language is not true. Language can be true in many ways. Language, even you look at the dictionary, words have multiple meanings, multiple definitions. And every person, like even though we have a lot of religious people, but all these religious people have their own eyes. They're not clones. You know, they're each, as if considered through the religious context, souls, you know. And it's fascinating because this multidimensionality is nothing new. I mean, it's like, you know, like Buddhists being like looking at the like a Buddhist looking at like a scientist, a theoretical physicist who's getting awarded for theories on parallel realities, and the Buddhist is like, really, bro? Like, what do you think the Buddha was doing? Yeah. So there is, strangely, it's like the world is made of the same elements, but its appearance shifts, and our intelligence is oriented to the control of the appearance of the moment. So what you can control, it's okay to control. What you can't control, it's important to study, because there may come a time where it's as if at first the person cannot control the chaos. This is the path to mastery. Those 10,000 hours of doing anything to become a master in it, as a suggestion, it's like that 10,000 hours is a suggestion that your mind is getting so many repetitions. It's like you're repeating something to such a degree that you're eventually seeing the blind spots in the activity. So it's like the person at first is like, what's a good example? Imagine a Zen monk back in the day is washing plates. And so he's washing plates, and at first he goes to wash the plates, he drops them, and it's like messed up, you know? But then he gets to a point of, after repeating that day to such a degree where it's, where the new is where your free will is expressed. We are not still at a point where we can properly define the mind. We are at a point where we have to first find the right questions to ask. And anytime in your life, if the answers you're getting for your life are not working, you got to change your approach, which means you got to ask the question differently. This is a skill of its own, and children are incredible at it, because the child's mind is less restricted, less shaped. It's like a symbiosis of light and matter and space, being vision. Science doesn't understand how much it can inspire the future generations. Science is taking the wrong approach. They are idolizing the past. Imagine science classrooms first begin with the context. You see, there's different kind of teachers. Some noob teachers, they throw the concept right at you. Some people introduce you to the context first. That means they may, it's like they ask why I should, they answer the question why I should care, and then the will to know arises. You know, I was walking downtown Toronto, and for a moment I was like, this is costume games. I was in the subway also, and I was like, what is this? We used to be on trees. Now we are in giant metal capsules moving at fast speeds. So I was like, it's definitely a costume game. But now this costume game has to be considered as a metaphor for the mind, where we are wearing various ideologies. So this was the one of the most profound things that I realized: a thought doesn't have to stay. You know, it's very easy telling people to have thoughts, but is it easy to tell someone to get rid of a memory? And how would one even go about doing that? Sometimes nature or the unknown is the divinity of the unknown is holding the steering wheel. That means certain moments that your only intelligence is just trusting the moment and it animates. But there are certain moments where there's more of a crystal precision required. That means responsibility is the complexity of greater dimensions being added. You see, it's as if the human being is first responsible for the self, for who they are, right? And after they're responsible for that, they're like, okay, then what is my world? Who is my world? Like, what does my world mean to me? And if your world means to you to, in some sense, see something and put it in a box, I'm telling you, evolution is beyond us. If we ever dare to think about the beyond, if philosophy roars like that again in modern civilization, do you know what it would mean? It would mean we are confronting, we are standing in the void after the apocalypse of the linguistic simulation. We are becoming creatures of deeper experience. Because if I tell you right now, just find any object around you right now, just look at any object around you, and I want you to visualize. Visualization is pretty simple, you know. Visualize that same object like a duplicate version of it, a copy, like the same object, but another version beside it, just hovering in the air. Now just keep visualizing this object that you're looking at just hovering in the air. Just keep visualizing it, you know? Just keep imagining this object, a copy of this object hovering in the air. Now, as you're kind of imagining this, we notice how come gravity is not pulling your imagination down? How come the visualization is not pulled to the ground? How come you can keep that copy of that object visualized there in the air? So you see, it's like the subjective realm is more unconditional. Do you see? So the more you go into the unconscious, the less the being can rely on the conditions that it has defined itself. That's the true journey of experience. An oscillation between attributes and the attributeless. That's the true mystical exploration. Because I'm telling you, there is no such thing as a mistake. If you looked at life as a designer, you would just see the movement of designs. Now, the mistakes arise because we have an emotional dimension, because we can at least sympathize, empathize. We can get a sense of what the species is going through. There's a poet called Rumi. He says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a place. He says, I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Guys, I'm gonna go through a quote tunnel. So, guys, I'm gonna read a bunch of quotes coming from people such as Nisargadatta Maharaj, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, Papaji, and various others. These are mystical contexts, more in the Vedic, towards a Vedic orientation. So, anyways, let's start it. Sri Nisargadatta says, "Don't talk to me about past and future. They exist only in your mind." Okay, yes, sir. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, "Understand your own mind, and its hold on you will snap. The mind misunderstands. Misunderstanding is its very nature. Right understanding is the only remedy." Nisargadatta Maharaj says, "I can describe the supreme natural state only by negation, as uncaused, independent, unrelated, undivided, uncomposed, unshakable, unquestionable, unreachable by effort." Yeah, because it's not dualistic, guys. Yeah. So, guys, I think this is just Nisargadatta Maharaj quotes. He says, "By its very nature, the mind is outward turned. It always tends to seek for the source of things among things themselves. To be told to look for the source within is in a way the beginning of a new life. Awareness takes the place of consciousness. In consciousness there is the I." The I is in quotations here. He says there is the I, who is conscious while awareness is undivided. Awareness is aware of itself. The I am, in quotations, is a thought, while awareness is not a thought. There is no, in quotations, I am aware in awareness. Consciousness is an attribute while awareness is not. One can be aware of being conscious but not conscious of awareness. God is the totality of consciousness, but awareness is beyond all, being as well as not being. Yeah, there you go. Okay, this guy just hit a home run. So this is exactly it, guys. We have to, the linguistic simulation is dualistic, so the person is searching a paradise. But really the state is non-dual. So that means it has to do with an experiential presence again, rather than, you know, transitioning personality, you know. Nisargadatta Maharaj says, "I am the other person. The other person is myself. In name and shape we are different, but there is no separation. At the root of our being we are one." That's an important quote, guys. Live with the world before living without it. To take appearance for reality is a grievous sin and the cause of all calamities. You are the all-pervading, eternal and infinitely creative awareness consciousness. All else is local and temporary. Nisargadatta Maharaj says the real is simple, open, clear and kind. beautiful and joyous. It is completely free of contradictions. It is ever new, ever fresh, endlessly creative. Being and non-being, life and death, all distinctions merge in it. Okay, this guy's really getting deep into this, sorry. Nisargadatta Maharaj says, who is the guru after all? Question mark. He who knows the state in which there is neither the world nor the thought of it. He is the supreme teacher. To find him means to reach the state in which imagination is no longer taken for reality, for truth, for what is. He is a realist in the highest sense of the term. He cannot and shall not come to terms with the mind and its delusions. He comes to take you to the real. Don't expect him to do anything else. The guru you have in mind, one who gives you information and instructions, is not the real guru. The real guru is he who knows the real beyond the glamour of appearances. What exists for you does not exist for him. What you take for granted, he denies absolutely. He wants you to see yourself as he sees you. Then you will not need a guru to obey and follow, for you will obey and follow your own reality. I think Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj has just literally hit home run after home run if philosophy was a baseball game. That's it, guys, your own reality. You got to learn to drive your mind. You got to learn to pilot your vision. Pilot your conscious being, your consciousness. Navigate your plane of existence. I consider nothing else superior. Not nothing else superior, but to be aware that the free will is here. And it's like, why would the free will be created? That means someone doubting themselves is like, I don't know how religious people can doubt themselves. I mean, I guess this explains a lot, but it's like, it's as if like you cannot, if you look at life really as a designer, if I could shift the context, there is no story. It's like Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj is right. Only in shape and language we are separate. But really, elementally, I mean, like, oxygen is a clue. We all kind of breathe in the same air, do we not? Of course, I'm not talking about pollution, but I mean this more in a metaphoric kind of way. But really, this is it, guys. So if we could kind of put a bookmark, in the journey of mysticism so far on this earth, it is really to take the attention of the human being to the direct experience where the true value system and the subconscious substructure of meaning is there before the conscious personality moves. So you see, it's like various relationships of self. I'll playfully use myself as an example right now. I can right now see myself in this moment playfully, objectively. I accept that I'm only one physical being in one room. Okay, I'm not saying like I'm not avoiding the objective realm by speaking about the beyond. The objective realm, if you can't acknowledge it, everything you see in the beyond will be filtered through the objective. So you gotta become comfortable with physical reality. The sooner the better, the easier your life will be. Once you learn to accept nature, and that's what freedom is. Freedom is not something to just take from your world, it is something to give to. Giving is a hidden door to the mind. So anyways, it is, I can say, I guess, wise to see self and other in self. But really, at the end of the day, it's just potential energy becoming kinetic. And it's just inanimate becoming animate, becoming inanimate becoming animate, conscious unconscious, conscious semi-conscious unconscious, conscious unconscious, semi like you're having dreams, you know. And so it's fascinating because it's like the projector light is on, but we have no idea how the projector is working. When we look at the mysteries of consciousness, we're wondering if this projector is connected to a computer. And that computer is the hidden framework of cosmic intelligence that can surpass our expectations if its dimension gives us greater right. That means a child born in a palace and a child born in like a small house, like a, you know, in a broken house is like there's a different psychological development. You know, there's a different view on the world. And that's the thing. The class distinctions exist because people are bound due to the need of survival to certain ideologies. That means that in order for the person to go to work, the person has to entertain the what I call the blind society. You have to how can I tell you? It's like I remember once writing a story where this black sheep gets a vision of slaughter machines and suddenly wakes up and realizes all the white sheep, like in a huge caravan, are all going that direction. And the black sheep starts going the opposite direction, and before going tells its family and friends, and just only like, let's say, two other people come, you know? And so this black sheep is going, and he finds himself in a situation where he is going against everything he believes in because he has seen how the narrowness of vision dominates the action. So sometimes you gotta open your eyes before you can think of closing certain chapters to your life. Reality is truly fascinating. It's a performance of a lifetime. I'm gonna read one more the Sargadad Maharaj quote, guys, and it's the shortest quote. He says, "Sin is all that binds you. Your ignorance, it brings the collective clarity only when you realize it." We have two options. Either we live for a better world or we don't. And that better world, I think it's like it can totally evolve. Like there's so much ignorant, not ignorance, but I'm like the planet, if it would, it like, if resources were not a problem, innovation would become incredible. And innovation arises from the mind of the human being. So it's like, think about 8 billion human beings in an advanced, efficient way, like advancing civilization. I know some people may feel like, okay, that's too good to be true to visualize it now, but I'll tell you it's not, because the seeds must be planted at some point. At some point, the children of the modern generations are going to be like, holy shit, our ancestors made so many mistakes, what do we do now? And they either will fight or flight. And that's what's happening. If we don't attend to our reality, our extinction is going to take us back to a savageness where we either have to fight our mistakes or we have to fly away from them. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Be free before you need to be. Namaste.